Hey guys, welcome back to Quick Notes with Chris. Today we're going to be talking about the book Outliers by Malcom Gladwell. The book is actually incredibly interesting because it doesn't necessarily have any distinct self-help things that you can apply today. You sort of do have to decipher it yourself and take out your own sort of teachings, but it does talk about a bunch of different interesting events from a bunch of different industries to different countries that you can actually take in a little bit of insight in, start applying in your life, and maybe start understanding the best, most efficient way to learn. The first thing that it starts to talk about is that he notices a difference between hockey players born between the earlier months of the year end up becoming better players than players born in the later months. And at first that just seems like a completely outlier thing, something that's nothing, that has nothing to do, there's no correlation. But then he starts to talk about how there's no coincidences. He starts to basically study correlated that hockey players that were born earlier in the year ended up being kept down. In Australian talk, kept down and ended up starting the end of the next year, the next semester, a little bit older. So basically, rather than them being the better hockey players, they were just more physically equipped, more physically mature, which allowed them to perform better, which basically ended up developing a small success for them, which got them better coaching because they were better players, and so on and so on, and so it started to spiraling. And it related that in a lot of other sports it's that way. Being born early in the year, which allows you to become an older person, leads to more mature physical specimen, which basically allows you to become a better player. So this is something I guess that you can take out of it, and that's the general gist of the book. So are these small outliers really outliers, or is there a reason behind why they're happening? The next thing he talks about is the 10,000 hours. So 10,000 hours is on average what it takes in order to become essentially a master, essentially an expert. A master class at whatever activity it is. 4,000 means that you're able to teach it, means that you're a teacher, you understand the behind it, and you can basically enable other people in order to potentially be as good as you, if not better. 8,000 hours means that you're good, means that you're respectable, but 10,000 is masterclass. It basically means that you're a professional. You can start making a living out of this. You're one of the top tier people. It also talks about how the wealthy versus unwealthy people, and this is another outlier that it covers, is how wealthy families that have children end up basically consistently occupying their time with a bunch of different activities, versus unwealthy families limit their children to having to do nothing. And that's a huge part and a huge reason as to why the wealthy continually create wealthy family members. It actually has nothing to do necessarily with the money itself, but the habits that they instill in these children. See, wealthy families basically instill that they always have to be doing something. Their time is valuable by default because they're always having, whether it's going to soccer practice, whether it's learning an instrument, they're always spending the time learning something. They're acquiring more and more skills. Whereas unwealthy children, they end up just having to entertain themselves with stuff that's never going to benefit themselves. So, what you can take away from that is it's not necessarily the wealth itself, but once again, how people are spending their time, which determine their future, which I thought was really interesting. That's just another example of the book. The next part that it talks about, which I actually thought was so interesting, and is the difference between Western civilizations and basically Eastern, specifically Chinese, and their learning differences. And why is it that the stereotype is that Chinese people or Asian people are so much smarter? Well, it actually goes on to a lot of things, even something as specific as language, which brings you to efficiency. So when counting, there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, all the way up to 10. But then all of a sudden something weird happens, and there's 11 and 12 when it should be 1 teen and 2 teen, okay, which makes sense, and then it goes to 13, 14, and 15. And it talks about how, in the English language, it's very easy for an individual to remember 4, but it becomes incredibly difficult once it reaches 8. However, in China, they noticed that the average people, it's a lot easier to learn 8 digits versus 4, right? And the differences between the English language and the Mandarin language is that they have shorter syllables. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, but even in China, it's even shorter syllables. So every single number has 1 syllable, which means that they're able to, on average, memorize double what an English person's able to memorize, which is just an interesting lesson of efficiency. So the way that I attribute that and that I learned that is that whenever learning something, always try to learn it in the most efficient manner. Create shortcuts and basically habits within yourself that allow you to apply it to make sure that you get the best effective time for your learning and execution. The next thing it talks about is how the difference between Asian culture solutions and Western culture solutions. So within the Asian culture solutions, specifically in farming, they have rice paddies. And it honestly takes a long amount of cultivation. There's no real shortcut to it. In fact, whenever Asian cultures wanted to increase their income, increase their amount of money that they're making, their solution is to work harder. right? Put more hours into the field, increase the land that they can plant, and keep going. That's their solution. It's just to work harder, work harder, work harder. Whereas over in the English world or the Western civilization, their solution is to just get better technology. Now, of course, there's going to be a healthy balance between the two, but the difference is that work ethic, okay, if you look at it as the differences, work ethic versus getting better technology, or in my understanding, talent, work ethic is always going to be a better result. And you can actually back that by the fact that majority of Japanese and Chinese cultures, they end up manufacturing majority of the world's goods. They're some of the most powerful corporations in the world. In fact, in Asian cultures, there's like the top. If you look at organizations and companies as basically countries, organizations as companies, right? They actually have some of the most leading and highest earning corporations in the world, if you even include the economies of countries. And that probably goes more to it's still that work ethic, working harder, is probably more long-term, or in most cases, more effective than just working smarter. Right? But you obviously want a combination between the two, and eventually that does end up happening. But it's just something to basically, little food for thought. The next thing they're talking about is that nothing is an innate ability. No one is born with becoming good at something. Talent is just a level of sophistication, but that can always be out-learned. And it basically says that talent doesn't exist. Talent doesn't exist, but attitude towards something does. Have you ever seen those kids who are incredibly good at math? They appear as if they're naturally good at math. Well, the truth is that they're not naturally good at math. They just have a better attitude towards it. They probably have a level of enjoyment or a level of obsession behind it, which is why they're able to basically achieve it. So basically it talks about how everybody has talent. Everybody has a level of potential. Work ethic is where it's at. Work ethic is something that you can consistently work with. There's so many stories. For example, what is it? Success happens when talent forgets to work hard. Success happens when talent forgets to work hard. If you look at some of the best athletes in the world, the reason why they are the best has nothing to do with talent. It has everything to do with the hours that they put in. The best shooters, the best kickers, the best, anything, you name it. They've just put so many hours into their craft that they've become elite. The key is being able to put yourself in an environment where you're able to utilize that amount of time that you do have to put an excessive amount of hours into the thing that you want to become better at. You want to be able to if you want to be able to become a master at something, you have to have the time to be putting it in. 10,000 hours is what it takes in order to become an expert. So where is it that you can maximize your output, right? You have to enable your environment to allow you to achieve that. That's why basketball players, that's why soccer players are able to stay elite. It's because they've set up a routine. Now, you look at any other person who's become successful in their life. Over a period of time, they had nothing else. They had one thing on their mind. It wasn't a question of if they were going to learn something else. Their number one focus was that, whether it was basketball, whether it was Bill Gates in coding, whether it was Magnus Carlsen in chess. There was nothing else that they were prioritizing in terms of learning. It was eating, sleep, boots. Straight into it. And that's how you want to be if you want to become a master. But now, if you're not wanting to chase that level of success and you are chasing a balanced lifestyle, then of course that's okay. Right? But if you want to become a professional, a top earner, someone who's a master at something and become incredibly successful, you have to have one thing, something that you have an entire focus around. Whether it's your business, your company, your project, your product, you have to have a level of obsession. You have to look towards becoming a master at it. That is the key and the only undeniable success principle that everybody agree with. If you go up to talk to anyone who's incredibly successful, they always give you the broad statement, just work hard. Just work hard. They're never specific because the thing is that's the only broad thing. You have to work hard. That's the only non-negotiable. There are a bunch of people who are incredibly intelligent who are poor. There are a bunch of people who are incredibly not intelligent who are rich. And there are vice versa as well. There's a bunch of highly intelligent people who aren't rich. There's a bunch of people who are incredibly poor who are poor. Who are incredibly not smart who are poor. And the reason is because success doesn't care about how smart you are. Success doesn't care about your talent. Success cares about how many hours, the work ethic that you're willing to put in, the blood, sweat, the sweat equity in order to making sure that your obsession is your obsession. Whatever you passionately pursue, you will possess. And that's really what Outliers talks about. So how there's all these different examples that basically support that work ethic is what allows success to happen. Not talent, not anything. It's all about work ethic. The person who puts in enough hours will eventually be presented with the opportunity in order to become successful. It's about being consistent rather than temporary bursts of excessive efficiency. All right. Anyways, guys, that's it for today's video. We'll be making a lot more in the future over there with Quick Notes with Chris to help improve yourself and put yourself in a better financial position. See ya.